This is one of our 4D classes on Zoom. Unfortunately, Larissa has a conflict with her work, and I don't know where Nico is, but we got Nat and Tanya. That's good enough to move forward.
Alrighty.
So, today we're going to talk about how to use this system. And I think this may be one of the more interesting pieces for you guys. And it's all about data. So you'll see my science background showing up a lot in all this. So I call it a 4D ready team. And it's a group of people with a boss or leader who's willing to do this work. One of my rules I made with NASA when I did a big contract with them was, I'm never going to do this work with someone who doesn't want to do it. It's a waste of my time, waste of their time. So it's got to be. I only work at the unit of a team, which I define as a group of people with a single supervisor. And sometimes people will want to combine two teams to save the money on the price of the TDA, which is not a lot. That's $400, something like that. And what the problem if you do that is you get a bad result. Both of them will claim the other team's doing it. So you got to, and the span of control in American companies is typically about 8 to 20, and that's about the right size to work with. So don't combine them. And then I give everybody a copy of the book. It's $20. It's cheap. It's a reference document. You can still get it from Amazon, but they're printing it kind of in a different way, a cheaper way, but you can still get the book if you want. And then we do the team development accelerator. So we call these team development assessments for many years until I discovered that they're actually more powerful as accelerators. And I try and emphasize that this assessment, it is the right word in the sense that it's taking data, but it's the wrong word in the sense that it's doing it for the purpose of evaluation. This is a really important point, that this is not an evaluative tool. People sometimes want to use it that way. And I say, the material's all free. You can do that, but don't put my name on it or 4D on it. And use it if you want to use it that way. We don't do evaluations. This is data and stimulants for development. And I'll show you these actually are accelerators. And here's the basic structure of it. The first thing is this an explanation of why the behavior is important. To me, it's intuitively obvious, but if you don't stop and think about this, it may not be obvious to you why, for example, appreciation matters, but it does. So that's actually, when I wrote this, I wrote it as an explanatory part of the tool, but it's a teaching moment. It's teaching you something. When you read it and you're learning, and I think when you're reading it with the intent of applying it, you're going to pay more attention to it. Then the question is, how do you make a measurement of behavior in an environment of normalization of deviance? You may remember I introduced this idea from Challenger, and behaviors that are deviant in ordinary terms are unnoticed. And one sort of way I think about this, the frog in boiling water, I'm sure you know this. If you increase the heat slowly, they just sit there and cook. Humans are not good at noticing anything that's happening slowly. So I didn't know how to do this, and I'm pondering this many years ago in a workshop at a NASA center. And the guy raised his hand and said, I know how you do it. And I didn't know how I did it, but I said, tell me how I did it. He said, you measured against a standard. And I said, oh, brilliant. So that's what I did. So there's a standard there that defines what good looks like, and they read that, and they're learning again. They've learned what their behavior is, and they've learned what it should look like when you're doing it well. Welcome, Larissa. We're just starting. We've been chatting, so.
My apologies.
So we have the standard, and all you do is you click a radio button. There's actually in between scores. If you always meet it, you get 100 points. That's the best you could do. And grade it down. And if you never meet it, you get 0. So this provides a number associated with each of the 8 behaviors. And then we invite comments to explain the rationale for the scoring. And the software as it existed before would prompt you for comments if you scored it really high or really low. Why are you doing this? And in the report, the comments are often the most interesting part because it provides a context for the measurement. So the thing's that simple. It goes through 8 behaviors and asks these questions. And the report starts with a static reminder, something that's not related to them. It kind of explains you should use the report for action learning. And I'll provide a worksheet, which I'll send you guys if you want to go with it. You don't need the worksheet, but it can be helpful to track along. And at the end of the briefing, it asked them to make some decisions. And so I'm alerting them to the fact this is a decision meeting. Decide when you're going to launch the next one. I recommend at least once a quarter. That's the first time I asked them if they want a workshop. I don't try and, well, when I was marketing this and talking to people, I would explain the idea of the 4D concept and social context and how it connects to team performance and so forth. By the way, when I launched into this at first, it was about leadership because it was the Hubble report that named the root cause of the Hubble's mirror failure as a leadership failure. And I went and talked to my friends who were project managers of NASA projects. They said, we don't care about leadership, we care about performance. And they're right. And the thing you're going to run to if you talk about leadership is you're going to find that institutions have their own leadership programs. They're usually ill-conceived, but they don't want to hear that. So you're talking about performance enhancement. And so I wait till now and say, do you want a workshop? And they almost always do. So, and then they get behavior-specific action items, and they're advised to pick 1 or 2 behaviors to focus on. And for the next quarter, just improve those. These are all sort of, I think, metaphorically like looking into a diamond from different facets. And if you improve any one behavior, you typically improve all of them. So, for example, if you start appreciating as a habit, people feel more included, you have less drama, so forth, so forth. So focus on 1 or 2 behaviors. And I found that you need to name a czar, somebody who's there in the organization to sort of remind them in staff meetings and things like that. We got to keep coming back to this work because repetition is essential. Then it tells you who participated, who completed it, who didn't complete it, and who chose not to complete it and what the reason was. And there's good reasons some people choose not to do it. They might say, I've just joined the team this week, or I don't know enough, and this kind of thing, or I'm not comfortable. So this is really in the sense of giving you the global picture of whose opinions you're seeing. And that's another context piece. So this is a static display that hopes to intuitively persuade you that teams that have these characteristics, people feel unappreciated and they're selfish, exclusionary and creating unnecessary anger, and there's no trust. They're blindly optimistic, uncommitted, and full of blaming complainers. I think you could see a team that scores down here is not going to perform very well. And a team where people are appreciative and generous, inclusionary and trustworthy, realistically optimistic and 100% committed and effective and accountable, that would be a higher performing team. I think this is obvious. To me it is. And so hopefully that's gives you some intuitive sense of what the scoring works. That's the curve of distribution that you get with the teams. And you'll notice it's not a normal distribution. It's misshapen. It's actually a skewed normal. And the term average is a mathematical term that refers to a normal distribution. So it doesn't really work for that, but it's the closest approximation I could do. So I use the average of the scores. I've looked at different ways to do it, and Occam's razor, the simplest one, is usually the best. And I tell people that you should think about the precision of this measurement as about half the width of these quintiles. And one of my problems is that people who don't understand statistics will think if a team scores, say, here and moves to here, that's a real change. Statistically, it's not. So I think if you can focus on your quintile, that's probably the best thing, which quintile you're in. And the first thing people want to do when they get a low quintile is that doesn't apply to me because I'm whatever reason. And we've looked at taking the data, and we have tons of it, slicing it all kind of different ways by occupation, by region, by country, by management versus project. These boundaries have never moved more than plus or minus 1%. So this is within the limit of a sort of half of one of these boundaries. It's a very accurate measurement. Everybody on board with this?
Yep,
Understand what I'm saying?
yep.
Yeah. I did have one question on
Yeah.
the 7 deadly sins are at play. See how he
Yeah.
builds teams. Is that in the book or?
Yeah, it is. So here's what happened. There were teams that so I learned the hard way that you don't do workshops with teams that benchmark down here. And so I at the time I had these 8 I call them client project program managers, each of the NASA centers, who were administering this, the guys that were retired NASA managers, top managers. And we started to talk about what makes a team come down here. Why are they here? And we found common things that I could tell you a few, like the money's grossly inadequate. A case like this, somebody made a bid for N dollars because the vice president made them when they know it's going to take 3 N or 4 N dollars to do the job. So they're constantly getting beat up by the customer. They're constantly overrunning, can't be done. So that's, as long as that metaphorically is a thorn in your foot, you can't run. You got to pull the thorn out. So I found 7 of them. I called them the 7 deadly sins. And so you stop and work as a consultant to remedy these. For example, if the problem's not enough money, I would try and persuade them, tell the truth to the customer, make a 4D request, tell how this happened, and ask the customer either to let you de-scope it or ask for more money. And that's basically living in integrity. Some would do it and some wouldn't. And that's one. Another one is incompetent team leaders. And I could measure that with an IDA of the team leader. And what's interesting there is when I found that was the problem, I'd sit down with the team leader and typically have a conversation. This is a project team, so a conversation like this. They said, I don't think you're competent to undertake the complexities of this job. And they would say, you're right. I don't like working with people. Now, if you don't like working with people, you should not be in a management job, especially a flight project management. So I said, okay, how'd you get here? Well, the common story is I'm technically really good. And so they wanted to promote me, so they put me in this job. So I've actually done this 3 or 4 times. I said, let's go talk to the director of projects. I'll go with you and tell them the truth. And let's get you reassigned to a technical job that you're comfortable with and can actually do, and do it in a way that preserves your dignity and your pay and everything else. And it's better for you and the team because you're not going to succeed. You're not going to get there. So that makes everybody happy. So that's another one. Another one is the organization is flawed. It can't function. That's straightforward to fix. Another one is they don't have any system engineering capability, which is important for these things. That means looking at how all the pieces fit together. So I named these the 7 deadly sins and wrote them down. There's a chapter in the book about them. I think you could rewrite them to any industry. They're written for aerospace teams, but similar things. And so if you get a bottom quintile team, and I sit down with the team leader and show him that list and say, which of these in play, he could point to them. He or she could say, it's items 3 and 4. Why didn't you do anything? Well, sun's in my eyes, I'm busy, whatever. So the important point is, if a team's down here, do not do a workshop. It's a waste of your time and theirs. Go deal with the issue as a consultant. Measure them a quarter later. They'll be up here if you've done your job right, or up here. Now you can go ahead and do the workshop and they'll benefit. Ironically, the teams up here, it might surprise you, are the ones that get the most out of the workshop. And they're the most fun to do. So we're deciding who's going to do the workshops. A low quintile team, we sort of argue about why I couldn't do it to get someone else to do it. And then the high quintile teams would all be elbowing each other to get in there and do it because it's more fun. So this is really important data on what's going on here. I'm glad you asked. Now, does that help?
Yeah.
So this is one, I picked this at random. so here we see data over time, and you can see that they've got a general trend up. And if they keep doing this, it'll keep going up. Once they get up here, they're going to find that they look like first-rate managers to customers and their own management. And the reason there's some scatter here is there's other events going on, like they might have gotten, I don't know what happened here, but they got a budget cut, had to do a de-scoping, that would be a blow, or somebody in the team died or got fired, who knows. Anyway, so the point is you can look at this and see the trend line is up. And the main thing is to keep doing these to stay up here. If you stop doing this, human nature is you can start to fall back. So I've taken a whole lot of teams from the bottom to the top over about 18 months. It can be done. All they got to do is do the work. Comments, questions?
I was just wondering if in the process of doing that during the 18 months, if it led to firing of any staff members or what have you, or it's just really the case when they change the behavior.
Let me show you some data on that. So this is the same team, I believe, or it doesn't matter. And here's individuals' perceptions, and you see that these people see they're all looking at the same thing. They see this distinctly differently as than sort of the rest of the team. So what to do about that? And some people's first instinct is to fire the people. And I say, no, that's not the right way to think about this. You got to think of this as a social context issue. And so ask people what's going on, what's happening with them. And Frank has one of his best stories about this, that when he was director of science at Goddard, there was a union representative, which was a thorn in his side. Government unions are interesting. They can't negotiate for any of the things normal unions negotiate for. They can't negotiate about salaries. That's set by law. They can't negotiate about hours. That's set by law. So they typically just make themselves a thorn in management's side. This guy was doing this, and Frank thought about this kind of thing. So he brought the guy in his office and said, you seem like you're a reasonable guy. What's going on with you? And the guy told him, he says, well, I was a software engineer, and I got removed from the job over a conflict with somebody else and got doing a job I hate. So I think if you talk to these people and ask them, why are you seeing the thing differently? You're going to generally find things you can fix. So the most common things are someone's in a job they don't like doing, and that's something you ought to deal with. Or someone's in a job they can't do. And go back to our colors, they could be a blue and an orange job. So if that's the case, you can either help them move on or remedy what's going on. So the answer to this is not firing people. The only reason you should ever fire someone is if they're doing something illegal, or if there's so in my view, firing someone is the person as the manager should be the culpable person. If they hired them, you should be culpable, accountable for the decisions you made. If you inherited them, then what I would do, frankly, is I would bring them in my office and say, look, you don't have a big future here. You don't fit very well with our division for these reasons. But I'll tell you what, there's one down the hall that they would be happy to have you, and I'll help you move. And go over there, you're going to be successful. And so you just have to work on these things and work on them in ways that support the people. There are people you just have to get rid of, but it's the exception. It's not the norm.
Quick question, Dr.
Yeah.
Keller. What's the difference between the TDA and the IDA? So the team.
They're the same, except this, that the TDA asks about teams' behavioral norms.
So each individual is evaluating the groups.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so that then explains
how do we behave towards each other.
Yeah, so that's why these scores are unusual and need to be looked at, because they are perceiving a different reality from
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's it. Thank you. That's exactly the point. Everybody's looking at the same thing. And why are they seeing it differently? They're seeing it differently because fundamentally they're unhappy with something, and deal with that. And sometimes the best answer is for them to go do something else, But this is I think, very humane way to deal with this stuff. The IDA asks about how people see a specific person's behaviors. And we always did IDAs with coaching. And coaches, I'll talk about this at the end, but coaches would help people change their behaviors so they're have more fun, more successful, et cetera, et cetera.
Is in the IDA, is the individual doing
Yep.
it themselves, or is the group?
People are asking, how do you see Nat's behaviors? So you get a 9 or 10 people.
Kind of like a
The way
300.
to set that up is ask for people who know you well enough that they can comment intelligently. It could be people from your last job. It could be family members. I did an early version of this when I was still at NASA, and I included people I knew didn't like me. I wanted to see the feedback, and sure enough, they said the guy's an asshole. So I have to thank you for sharing, you know. So, and I knew it. So I got some clarity out of that, removed all doubt. So this is the IDAs are never shared with anybody but the coach and the person. The TDAs are never shared with anybody other than the team leader. And I should say here that the team leaders brief these to the teams. So I had a team at an aerospace company that was asked to do this work by the NASA Field Center they contracted with. And their scores are going up very nicely. Everything's getting better. Then suddenly the scores plummeted back down. So I looked at what was going on, and they changed team leaders. And the first guy said, this looks like stuff that makes sense to me. I'm on board this. The replacement said, this is a bunch of crap the customer's making us do. Let's slow roll this. And so the team leader I saw was so important. So I quit doing the briefings and I taught them how to do the briefings. And they did the briefings. I wanted them to own it, the process, and own the thing. So hope that helps.
It does, but over the so many years that I know you, Charlie, and have a privilege to really to study your 4D system, which is amazing. Thank you, by the way. You changed me over the last 12 or 14 years, what have you. But I'm still thinking about being green and still operating in some sort of managerial or leadership position. Is it completely excluded from just what your thoughts about the being green? Like, I know Frank is green as well, but he had
So
different.
so when I formed this company, NASA got interested in this work. People in NASA who knew me from when I worked there thought there was something to this, and they gave me a very large contract, a $35 million contract, which for a one-person company is a big contract. I take it back. I think the first one was 9 million, the second one was 35, $9 million contract. So we won the thing. And the guy, my business partner at the time, I said, we got a problem. And he said, what is it? I said, he worked for GE before he joined me. I said, you're not going to understand this, but the government's going to get mad if we don't spend the money. He said, how can that be? I said, trust me, I worked there a long time. And the way it works is if you get appropriated money, they have a thing where at the end of the year, if you haven't costed it, which means you spent it, they'll take it and give it to somebody else who can spend the money. So we got to spend, whatever it was, $4 million next year. And got bad news. We priced in our labor rates. It's just the two of us. So we can't, we can't charge away this, and we can't do teams fast enough. And so I asked myself, who were the best managers at each of the 8 NASA centers I'd ever worked with? And I called up each one of them and said, would you come do this work with me? So I got an early retirement because the government used to have what's called the defined benefit retirement plan. They don't have that anymore. And that was actually why I stayed with the government despite getting big job offers from industry, was because of that retirement program. But most of us retired late 50s, early 60s. I did it a little sooner. So I got relatively young guys, still want to contribute, still want to do some work. And so all of them said, yeah, I'll do this with you. So we did the personality piece and put on your seatbelt. 7 out of 8 were green.
Oh my.
Yeah, the best managers were green. And why is that? Well, because people like to work for managers who they believe care about them.
Mm.
And so they were all had advanced technical degrees. So they're all forced to learn the blue and orange by virtue of the university teaching that. So they were inherently four-dimensional because they were born with the personal side and trained in the logical side. Like you, so you've got a technical degree. So
I do.
so you had to go through the fires of academia to get those things. And so I have other people I knew who were greens who did not have these technical degrees, and they usually got jobs kind of off the main path somehow. They would be doing some kind of staff function. And when I figured this out, people I knew at NASA, I went and took them. Like I came back, I was traveling back there fairly often. I had this contract. I go to lunch and talk to them. They said, "Yeah, I've always felt uncomfortable in this place. I never knew why. I never felt like I really fit in." So the greens, businesses are orange. Greens are going to struggle with orange. This is my best explanation of this. You might see if you agree with this or not, just how I think about this. But they had to learn the technical side. And Gene Kranz, who I've talked about, was a yellow. He was given the biggest jobs in NASA. He was given the flight control for the moon landing and the flight control for Apollo 13. He was an Air Force pilot. And if you're going to fly fighter planes and with the advanced degrees in engineering, so he could do that, but he had this yellow side and people liked him. So people like working for the greens and the yellows. People generally don't like working for the blues. They'll tolerate us for a while, but we're difficult people to work for usually, especially 1D. Think of Steve Jobs. His own daughter didn't talk to him for 10 years. So neighbors hated him. You can look around, see these people.
Elon Musk is also a blue.
Yeah, he's a 1D blue. I like the guy because I appreciate what he does technically. But
Yeah.
I'm probably just as happy not having him living next door.
Oh, thank you. All these years I was kind of shy or didn't feel comfortable asking you about being green. I felt like maybe it just puts me in the
Well, I think Frank and I are the one reason we gravitated toward each other is we're both intuitors above everything else. And so for him, the next blue is straightforward. That's why he has an advanced degree in physics. And training for me is straightforward. That's because we're both poke up into that top where the two things are the blue and the green. So for me, the 4D work was ideal because I'd use my blue to build the material and exercise my green in teaching the classes.
Nice.
And Frank, he's the mirror image. He's green, but he can do the blue. So that's why they hire him to chair these panels. I don't think it's because he's the smartest. He's a smart guy, but I don't think that's why they're hiring him to run these panels. It's because of his greenness, that he appreciates and respects people, and they trust him. So the green is, don't ever be ashamed of being green.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. That's music to my ears. And now thanks to you, I understood much more about why is that in different places where I work. I quite often was the only person who was able to somehow work well with blues and with orange. So when people kept like asking me, how in the world you managed to work with them? So but I was able to maintain a good relationship with orange and blue.
Yeah, and people, I'm sure you naturally appreciated them, and it's a very deep human need to feel appreciated. So you're meeting their deepest needs. Their deepest need is not for another nonlinear differential equation. It's to be valued. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I took time off everybody's. Yeah. Thank you, Charlie.
All good discussion.
Everybody following along?
Yes, thank you.
So I talked a little bit about why this is an inaccurate measurement. And one factor is the dispersion of perception. So you don't have everybody up here in one spike seeing it the same way. You can see lots of differences of opinion. Then the fact that that's what a normal distribution looks like, and it's not normal with these people, I call them out of family over here. And small number statistics. I'm not going to talk much about this, but there's inherent imprecision in small numbers. If you do experimental physics, you have to deal with this all the time. It's just trust me, it's a fact. So this is what it would look like. It does a relative ranking of the behaviors. And so this is real data. You can see this team's got pretty good orange. Including's good. Uh-oh, so what's this? They don't keep their agreements. So what I would say to them advisedly is, here's your highest leverage work, when you leave the room and go to work, to get clear. And you can take the module from the workshop, all my intellectual property is free to everybody, which I think was a good thing from the get-go. You can train that module yourself. It takes an hour or two. You can read it and talk about it. You can brief it to the group. You can start having people process broken agreements with the 5-step process, and you can improve this behavior. And sure enough, what happens is they measure 3 months later, and they've almost always got improvement, and people love to think they're getting better. So this is what the thing would look like. Here's the explanation of the what the behavior is about. Appreciations improve your performance and make being at work enjoyable. Why not create an enjoyable work experience when it's so easy? You create a context of mutual respect. People communicate much more openly. Open communications enhance performance and reduce risk. So that's my version of why you should care about this behavior. This is not about being nice. It's about work performance. And here's a standard that people do it habitually, which means you do it automatically. And I'm there now, authentically. We talked about this, and the best way to make it authentic is to live in gratitude. So when you express it, it's going to be authentic. Do it soon, promptly. I've talked about this, that, places like NASA and the contractors would have an awards ceremony at the end of the year. I think it's much better if you can give someone on the fly, give the award. Make it proportional. Don't give somebody a big appreciation for some small thing. Then make it very specific. And I'd like to talk about a team leader I worked with. I shadowed the guy, and I would do that once in a while, spend 2 or 3 days just living with them the whole day. Everybody that would come into his office, he would, I know I've talked about these things before, but I don't think this repetition is harmful. He'd pat him on the back and say, good job. So we did a workshop, and I, in front of him, asked the group, what's it like when Pete says that? They said, we hate it. He went, what? I said, yeah, it's so rote. It's got to be specific. So that's the standard that best I could think of. Does that make sense to you? I call it HAPS.
Yeah.
And then here's the data that the thing used to make. It would benchmark this behaviors here. The average of all behaviors for this particular team is here. So you see it's a little below average, but it's not significantly. And then you're going to see the comments. And again, the comments, I think, are the most interesting part. And this is just one I picked randomly. I've seen this frequently. It's part of our culture. You're starting to say we're under pressure to get things done. This is an obstacle to it. So what I would do if I were briefing the report, when I was doing this with a team leader, I'd say, these look like really good comments here to generate action items. So I'd highlight these when you go through the report. But by the way, you've got to leave everything in. If it says that the team leader's a jerk, leave it in there. And the way you talk to it when you get there is you can say, well, I appreciate that you got the courage to tell me what you think. I'm not going to dwell on it because we're here to look at positive things, but thank you for letting me know your opinion. And you often will know who it is. And if you do, you can ask them to come in and talk with you later about what's going on.
Are these normally given anonymously, or do people?
It's all anonymous,
Okay.
completely anonymous, and they've got to believe that. By the way, they telegraph who they are, but they make a big deal out of anonymity, but they telegraph who they are in their comments. They make their comments so pointed that you know exactly who did it, who said it. When it's, especially when it's critical. So, and again, the team leader has to be brief that when you see these things, do not attack back, do not attack the person. Instead, take it as information, thank them for sharing in a polite way, and move on. If you leave it out, they're going to know you left it out, then nothing will have any credibility. So I think it's 9:58. We'll stop for today. Any closing comments? Is this a good session?
It's a great session, as
Yeah, I think
always.
this was the next missing piece for me. I had actually watched the video of you, and I forget the other gentleman's name, where you were walking through how to create a TDA process on your own. But there, I don't know, maybe I just needed the repetition, or if it
Yeah,
was
need
just
repetition.
missing, but yeah, super helpful.
So I'm going to show you.
Just my
Yeah, go ahead,
just
Nico.
my apology for being late. I had to assist people, yes, so sorry for that. Out of hands.
Okay, so next session, I'm going to show you why this is the most powerful human development tool ever existed.
Exciting.
Sound like fun?
Yes.
Sounds like fun.
Looking forward
Yes.
to it.
See you next week, and I'll have a report on our trip to Rawlings. Now,
Awesome. Can't wait.
Come on, Junko and I are going to spend the night in Wyoming tomorrow night.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
Just
have
a
a good
little,
time.
little side trip. The weather's cool. At the moment, the house is operating fine. We're gonna take a break, and she wants to go and probably do something we don't do very often, eat beef. So anyway, that's,
Mm.
you can't go to Wyoming and eat veggie dishes, I don't think.
Yeah. Should be fun.
Thank you
Yeah.
all. See you next week.
You.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Be
Bye.
well. Be well.